What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your co-hosts, Spencer and Gabe, and today we are joined by our friend Sam to talk about Shadow's Edge, the second book in the Night Angel Trilogy by Brent Weeks. We'll introduce Sam properly in just a moment, but first, if you enjoy this content, please hit those like and subscribe buttons to keep up with all of our upcoming content, like more Night Angel episodes and a big group discussion with a bunch of authors like JT Greathouse, MJ Kuhn, and Zach Argyle, plus many more. You can also follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy if you enjoy me basically making an ass out of myself on the internet. But no, really, we post about fantasy and sci-fi related stuff as well as what we're reading at the moment. And sometimes you'll even get pictures of my dog. With all that out of the way, let's introduce our guest and talk about what we've been reading lately. How's it going, Sam?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Wonderful.
So what do you do on the internet, and where can people find your content?
So I'm in a couple of places. I started on Instagram. It's shelfish_ with Sam. I do a lot of just, I have a million books and bookcases. So I do a lot of like those kind of photos. I do a lot of synopsis recommendations for people if I can't, get a lot of reading in, really short reviews. Every once in a while, I post something on my blog, very once in a blue moon. I've slowed down on Instagram lately, and I just love book Twitter. It's one of my favorite places in the world that I've discovered because everyone's so much nicer there, I found, than anywhere else. So if you want to find me on Twitter, it's Sam Reads 56, but you're going to also get a lot of like Formula One content along there too. So if you like both of those, you can find me there.
Awesome.
Formula One, like racing?
Yes. Oh
Heck
my God.
Yeah, I love it.
Obsessed. My husband got me
Really?
into it like 5 or 6 years ago. And now, I've got my sister and her boyfriend obsessed, and we all watch on Sundays together and, do breakfast and watch the race. And
that's cool.
So we just had the second race. It just came back last week. So I'm one happy girl,
Nice.
Oh, wow. That's
Nice.
awesome.
Yeah.
For sure.
Most recent read though, did you guys read Project Hail Mary, Andy Weir?
I have not yet. People have been recommending it to me. It's from the same guy who wrote The Martian, right?
The Martian. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
It was
you like
really
it?
good. I enjoyed it. We did it for the book club that I was in, and it's definitely not something I would have picked up on my own, and B, I don't think I would ever reread it. And I'm a big rereader. If I love a book, I'm going to go back to it. If I'm like stuck on what to read, I'll go back to things.
Definitely.
Very scientific. I'm like, he has to have some sort of NASA, experience, something, with engineering and space and all of that, because it's very scientific. And I enjoyed it though. It was a really good read. I would definitely recommend it, like 4 out of 5 stars to anyone.
Okay.
But if I hadn't listened to it, I think it would have been harder for me to get through, because there's a lot of science talk in it.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Have you read The Expanse? Any of the Expanse books?
No, I have not. I don't do a lot of sci-fi. I do more fantasy because, well, you know how I can't picture things? When things are in space, it's like, oh my God, I can't picture anything. Like the Red Rising series, once they get to space, I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I can't picture any of this.
Okay. Yeah. I'm the same way. I mean, I tend to visualize things, but what I mean is I tend to primarily read fantasy as opposed to sci-fi, but The Expanse has just completely stolen our hearts.
Really? I'll have to write it down. Because
it does the thing where, so like you were saying with the Andy Weir book is, it sounds like he gets really into the scientific mumbo jumbo. And The Expanse has that to some extent, like you feel like everything is really advanced and really like everything makes sense within this world. It's all very scientific, but he does not bog you down with all of the mumbo jumbo. Like it's not this huge description of, oh, this flux capacitor works because this thing is powering it. Like he he doesn't go into that really at all. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's there if you're into that kind of thing, but if you're not, then I mean, it's so smooth.
I would say this one had like half, like was
oh wow
science explanation.
Oh
so,
wow.
And you're like, you're definitely right. Like I can see where you're going with this, but you could have like cut that page down to like a sentence and I would have been like, okay, got the same effect.
Right, for sure. What's the what's the basic synopsis on that? Because I've seen this book everywhere, but I have no idea what it's about.
So the Earth they find out that like the sun is dying, essentially. There's this I don't know what to call it. I would almost call it a predator because it's eating the sun. They call it astrophage.
Okay.
And the whole point of the book is they're doing this Project Hail Mary mission to send 3 people into outer space to try to go to this one star in the solar system because it's starting to affect like the whole solar system that isn't affected. So they're like, we need to find out why this one star isn't affected. And then we can, you know, maybe hopefully use that information to save the sun and save our planet.
Okay.
But if they don't, like everybody knows everybody's going to die. Like they're going to be in the ice age in, I think like 30 years or something. It was going to be very fast.
Wow. Okay.
So it just follows the one scientist who goes on the mission and it's all about him in space. And he goes back and forth, like from what brought him out there to where he is present day. And it's about him meeting another life form while he's out there. So that's like the really, really interesting part. And it's them working together to figure out how to save both of their planets. So that was the part I liked. It was really cool. And, how they start to communicate together, how they have to learn and to be able to speak. And it was really great. So, I mean, if you're into that kind of science stuff, absolutely. I'm not, and I still enjoyed it.
For
but
sure.
If you are, I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like something we might like, huh, Gabe?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, for sure. So you mentioned Red Rising earlier, and that is actually something that I started this week, I think, or earlier this week. And you know, I was saying this on our last episode, but so many people have said either people have outright said that they didn't enjoy it at all. There's other fans that really, really enjoyed it. And then it's just a mixed bag kind of all across the board. So I put it off for a long, long time. But then recently on Audible, they were having that, I don't know if you remember that, like 75%. Yeah, that was insane. Like the whole site was like 75% off. And so Red Rising was like $3. And so I picked it up and I wanted something in between the books we were reading for these 2 podcasts. And man, I am absolutely enjoying it. I'm loving it so far. Yeah.
The first couple books are great. They're great. And then I just stopped. I think I read the first 3 or 4.
Okay.
And then you're just kind of like, how much fighting can I read about? You know, how many space problems can there be? But no, the first book is one of the first, second, and third books are some of my top favorite books ever. Like,
okay.
I don't know how far you're into the first one, but the first one's one of my favorites. It's phenomenal.
I'm probably about 40% of the way into it. They just started doing the kind of like Hunger Games type thing.
Yes. That's what I love
mean?
about it.
Yeah.
I thought that was just so great. I was like, I want more of this. Like that fascinated me. You know, these kids who just have to like Hunger Games each other.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really enjoying it because I think the thing that has drawn me to it is, you know, the main character, I could take or leave him, but the idea overall of this like society between Earth and Mars and wherever, and like just kind of this hierarchy with the golds and the pinks and the browns and the reds. And I just want to know, like, I want to know how humanity got to this point. I want to know, like, there's so many questions I have.
I'm someone like that where I'm like, I want the backstory. I'm like this hierarchy and how it came to be. And, like the colors can't mix, and
Yeah.
how they turned him into a gold to get him there. And
That's so wild. Yeah.
it was so crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love them. The first couple ones are really good.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, I really want to. The thing I see people really raving about is the second trilogy or whatever, the Dark Age and all that. And so I really want to get to that point, because I would imagine that it just gets so massive, like everything just gets so big. If things are already at the point that they're at in the first book, I can only imagine. But yeah, I did really like that part with the kind of a cyberpunk type thing going on. Some cybernetic engineering there, human engineering. I really love that part. Let's see. The other things that I'm reading are, have you seen in the Twitter sphere this We Break Immortals book going around?
Yes, I've seen it everywhere, but I've been on a little bit of a book buying ban for the last few months. I've like taken over our spare bedroom at home. All 5 bookcases are filled, and my husband's like, there's no way you read all of these. He's like, you got to chill. And I'm like, all right. So I picked up a different hobby to spend money on, which is crocheting. So,
I thought you were going to say that's when I picked up a Kindle and I just have them all on there.
No, I do have a Kindle with a bunch, but I prefer physical books. I'm a bit of a collector. I'll go in our spare room and just sit and look at them sometimes.
Yeah.
I like owning them all. And I do miss, though, from e-readers, how if you're confused on somebody pops up and you're like, I don't remember this person, how you can search their name, to see where else it showed up. And I miss that kind of stuff from e-readers, but
yeah,
I love owning the physical books,
I know. I was just telling Ben from Literature and Lo-Fi this earlier. I was like, I was always I always kind of made fun of Kindles and e-readers and stuff, because I was just I mean, having the physical book is just the pinnacle of, reading. Right. But then once I got when I was stuck at my mom's for those 2 weeks and it all snowed in and everything, she got me a Kindle for Christmas. And I was floored with how much I have fallen in love with the Kindle.
I know.
It's so light, because I was reading We Break Immortals, and it's such a heavy book. And, after an hour of reading, I was like, dude, this thing is falling. I can't hold this thing anymore.
Yep.
And so then once I got the Kindle, it weighs like nothing.
And you can hold it in one hand. You're fine.
Exactly. And so that was a fantastic part of it. But anyway, so I've been reading We Break Immortals. I have absolutely fallen in love with that book. I could definitely see it being my number 1 favorite book this year.
Ooh,
yeah.
Okay.
So I would highly recommend it. Thomas Howard Riley has put in some serious work into that book. And yeah, it is epic fantasy in the truest form, and then the other thing I've been reading is, did you ever read We Men of Ash and Shadow by Holly Tinsley?
No, I have not.
Okay, so I have that was my number 1 favorite of last year. And then this year, or just maybe a couple weeks ago, she sent us the advanced reviewer copies of the sequel. And so yeah, I'm reading the sequel right now, and it is so good. It is so good.
I love that when you get an early copy, but then if it's really good and you're done, you're like, okay, the book hasn't even come out yet. So if I'm waiting for a sequel, I can't talk about it. If I'm waiting for a sequel, this hasn't even come out yet. So we have to wait so long.
I know. Yeah, it's one of those things where once the audiobook comes out, I'm going to be listening to the audiobook a bunch of times this year for sure. All right, Gabe, you read, I know we kind of talked about this on the last episode, but just for continuity's sake,
Yep.
You read of Blood and Fire.
Yep. And that was an awesome book. Just
Ryan Cahill.
Yeah,
Ryan Cahill, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I just got that book. I haven't started.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I loved it. Kind of a coming of age story. Dragons, who can say no to dragons?
I love dragons. Love them.
And so
I bought that and Illborn at the same time. They were both everywhere on Twitter at one point, together.
That's awesome.
But you liked it? What would you rate it out of?
I loved it. Out of 5 or I'll go out of 10. I would probably rate it probably an 8 out of 10. There was a couple things.
I'll take that.
Yeah, for sure.
That sounds about right. For sure.
A couple things that I'm sure you'll notice, but other than that, the story was sound. The characters were awesome. Mm-hmm. I love the layout, and the world building was superb. I think, it was a good book all around. Wonderful book.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm big on the world building. I need like all the details about everything going on, all the places. I need all of that. That's like a big thing for me when I'm reading.
For sure. You mentioned Illborn, and real quick, I've seen that everywhere, but I don't know anything about it. What did you enjoy it?
I didn't start it, so I bought them both. Those were the only books I've bought this year, I think, so far. And I couldn't help it because they were both all over Twitter everywhere. Yeah. I want to say the authors, they're very active, and I think I've gone back and forth with both of them. And they were like chunky boys, and I love like a thick book. That's like the first thing that attracts me to something is it's a long book.
Okay.
I like long books because I usually read a lot and I read really fast. I work at home for myself at like part-time, so I have a lot of time on my hands, to just read. So I tend to go for the really thick ones because they'll last me a little bit longer,
For sure.
Like Empire the Vampire I read recently, the new
I
Christoph
love that
book. I blew through that book in like 2 days. I could not put it down. It was so good. And I had the illustrated one, which for someone who can never picture things when they're reading, it was like a godsend for me. And I didn't know like illustrated books were a thing for adults. That opened like a whole new world for me. So that was my probably favorite read so far this year. That book was so good.
Yeah, that's definitely another one you got to read, Gabe. It was a really, really good book for sure.
Copy that.
I found a signed edition of that at I think Barnes and Noble. I was so happy. It was like the very last one.
I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous. Yeah, I didn't know that illustrated books were a thing.
Right.
And like one of my favorite series of all time is Any Rhaenyra by Michael J. Sullivan. And apparently there's like an animated or illustrated one for that. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to go out and buy another set of the same books I already own, because
that's cool.
If there's an illustrated one, I'm like, I want to read that now.
Have you seen the illustrated Kingkiller Chronicles?
No.
Yeah. You should look up The Name of the Wind 10th Anniversary Edition. And it has all the fan art and everything in like every 10 pages. There's like fan art.
So are you guys like huge Rothfuss fans? Because I am like, I follow his Twitch. Like I get notifications when he goes live. Like I'm obsessed with him.
So here's the thing is I don't follow his Twitch because I'm like, I just want you to write the next book. I'm like, I don't want to follow your Twitch.
But he did a whole stream on it and let people ask him questions.
Kind of. He was super evasive.
Well, he did too. He did one recently where he was more evasive, but he did one sometime last year, I think.
Oh, okay.
And he was like giving away so much of the book to the point that I was like, stop. I don't want to know anymore. Like you're giving things away. Yeah. So
you'll have to link that to me sometime.
Yeah, I'll have to find it and send you. I did it for someone else too, because I was like, he's talked about it. I was like, he gave a lot away. And then he recently read the epilogue the prologue. I think, recently. And it started out the same as his other books.
I know.
Silence in 3 parts. And I was like, come on. Like,
the one cool thing that we got out of that though was it sounds like the basement is in disarray and that he's like mixing potions and all sorts of other stuff. So it's kind of like, what's he doing down there? You know? But it sounds like he is going to read the first chapter from that book or a chapter or something. He's going to get a bunch of his like audiobook narrator friends to help him do that. So I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll definitely have to check out that Twitch
I'll
stream.
find it and I'll send it to you. It's really, really good. But like, be warned, I think he gave a lot away that I was just kind of like, oh, I didn't want to know that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be careful for sure. For sure. All right. Well, let's hop into our book of the day today. For what are we doing? Shadow's Edge.
Yep.
So listeners, this is your spoiler warning. If you have not read the book, you might want to turn back now, come back when you've read it. All right. Spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1. You've been warned. All right. So what I would like to do real quick before we get too far into Shadow's Edge is we had some guests on last week that we really enjoyed having on, but they did not enjoy the book as much as us.
I saw that.
And so I would like to just take a moment and kind of have the opportunity to talk about like, why we like this series, what we enjoyed about the first book, and kind of why this series is one of our favorite fantasy series of all time. So Gabe, do you maybe want to start us out and just talk about what we like about the series, what you like about it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think probably some of the key points that I would say that I really enjoy of the series are the magic system. First of all, having the talent. I thought that was a super interesting way to like bring in magic. I like that only certain people have it, right? So like you're born with it. I don't know why I like that, but I do. The world. So like kind of this distraught, like grimdark, very evil place, right? And so like you got your sections, you got the Warrens, and then wherever anything else. So that's interesting. Assassins. What's not to like about assassins?
Yeah.
I like the characters, like Azoth. His whole, obviously that's what this is about. But I really like his kind of like underdog. Movement up until now. It's really good. And then like the stuff like with his friends. Yeah, I'm not very good at giving synopsises. So
no, it's okay. I was just curious, like what were the main drawing points of the series?
Yeah, so that's probably like the magic system, the assassins, and then just like his, kind of just his way of doing things, I guess, for lack of better words.
Yeah. And his, like you mentioned, his found friends. It's really interesting to watch Azoth go from Azoth to Kyler, but also have this life in the Warrens that is so terrible. It's like one of the worst lives anybody in this world of mid-Cryo could imagine having. And just seeing so many horrible things happen when he's young. His best friend gets raped, and then his other best friend gets her face cut up, and it's absolutely terrible. And so he goes from that to kind of moving on into a new stage of his life and finding a friend in Logan Gyre. And then he meets Count Drake, and he's finally getting a little bit of hope. And when we first see Kyler go from Azoth to Kyler, and it kind of fast forwards a little bit, and he's like 17 or something. Yeah. He's like really jaded and cynical and kind of hates everybody. And through Logan's friendship, through Count Drake's mentorship, and through Eileen's love, he finds this kind of softer, more golden part of his heart. And it kind of turns him into what we see in the second book here. And so, I love a good redemption arc, especially if it's I think this one I like specifically because it's a redemption arc of somebody who is first and foremost a total badass, but also starting out, he is like this jaded, cynical kind of person. And then he kind of has more of a leaning towards the light side with Eileen. But then even we see in the second book, he's still, he's trying to get away from the assassination trade, but he just can't seem to give it up. Like there's a part of him deep down that he finally has to admit to himself that he does like it.
Yep.
And so, it's interesting what he does with that knowledge. He can either, or with that realization about himself, he can either be like, okay, well, I'm just going to go back to what I've always done, or he can use his gifts in a way that help his friends and help his kingdom. And so, we see him being kind of subordinate to Logan, and Logan is Kylar's king now. And he's like, I'm with you all the way. Whatever you need me to do, I will use my assassination abilities for the good of Scenaria. And so, man, I just think it's such a good arc. And there's so many characters, especially in the second book, that we start seeing more of, that just get fleshed out so much. But like Gabe said, I think for me, the things I love about this book is the series is the relationships that are formed. There's more than a few like tear jerking moments that completely get me every single time. I love all the like super badass, like assassin stuff, but also, just the way everything wraps up in the end. And obviously I'm not going to give anything away, but by the end of the third book, it is so interesting where things end up. Like it's probably not, I mean, maybe it's what some people would expect, but it's definitely not what I expected when I was first reading these. And it's interesting too, because the first book goes from a very Kylar focused story that is really, it's really focused on like everything is grimdark, everything is sad and tragic. And then into the second book, we get a little bit of hope, and we get like 5 more point of view chapters. Like everything opens up to all these other characters that we get to know. And then by the time the third book comes around, we have even more point of view chapters.
Oh God.
And everything has just opened up so much. Or maybe we probably don't get too much more in the third book, but we definitely get at least a couple more. But by the third book, everything has opened up so much that this is no longer like a narrowly focused, like grimdark story. This is like a sprawling epic fantasy.
Well, it's kind of like, Game of Thrones. They start with a few, and by like the final book, there's like 10 point of views you're reading from.
Right. For sure. So anyway, that's why I like the book. There's probably stuff from the first book that I would love to talk about, but maybe we'll just, or actually, Sam, since you weren't on the last episode, what did you think of the first book?
So I liked the first book. I did the audiobook, so I didn't like physically read it. And I said, I kind of wish I had physically read the book, because I think a few things kind of went over my head from listening to it, but sure. I liked it. I like grimdark. I know a lot of people can get uncomfortable with it, but my whole point of view on grimdark is like, they're showing us things that actually happen in real life. Like if there was a real war, even now or 100 years ago, like rape, those kind of things happen. Right. And any book that kind of either like alludes to it, but doesn't let you know, I'm just like, we know this is what really happens. So I think of it more as just like realistic. They're telling us what really is going to happen. And I actually appreciate that, because, that's real. But I enjoyed it. He starts off with one name, and then he has another. And like you were talking about before, he starts out in the slums. And then when he finally goes over the bridge or wherever it is, he literally says like, oh my God, like there's like drains, and, there's no like people's bodily fluids everywhere. And there's like these trash cans and stuff. And you're like, whoa, like these people live so close to each other, and they're living in these completely different worlds. And all it takes is like walking across one bridge. Right. And he's like, oh my God, like what have we been living in? I think the book was very like tropey. Like there was a lot of tropes throughout the book. Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't. I would just say the main thing I didn't is like his obsession with Aline. doll girl.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones where it's like your kids, you know, you don't even really know each other. Like
Yeah.
this is infatuation. It's not love, at least maybe not yet.
Right.
And you're gonna go through so much for her. So but I would say like overall, like I would have given it like a 4 out of 5. The first one. I think I might have enjoyed it actually a little bit more than the second one. So
yeah, for sure. I think there's a couple of things I want to comment on. I think that his obsession with Aline is the more times I read this, the less I like Aline.
Yeah.
You know, I've probably read this series, I don't know, maybe 8 times now, 8 or 9 times. Yeah, cool. Cause this was like the first adult fantasy book that I ever picked up. And that was like, I don't know, at least 12 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I every time I read this, Aline just seems more and more obtuse to me. And I think like, I don't understand. I guess in some ways I do understand, because I remember being like a very young man and having like, you know, someone that I was friends with. I'm like, I'm in love with them.
I'm in love.
Yeah. But, so, you know, on some level I get that, but by the time we get to the second book, he's committed, you know what I mean? Like he's really committed to this whole thing. And Dorian brings up a good point, or no, it's not Dorian. It's Jarl when he comes to visit, and he's like, why do you give a fuck what she thinks? Like, why do you care at all what she thinks of you? Like, she is not from your world. She is not like all these things. And, you know, usually I'm like, you know, when I read this before, I was like, shut up, Jarl, like they're meant for each other, whatever. And especially this time through, I'm like, yeah, I kind of see his point, because then we get Viridiana on the scene, and she is she's a badass and she is perfect for him. And so I love the two of them together. And I think, you know, even though these books kind of do have like the hated love triangle, I think it does it really, really well, especially in the third book. It's going to throw a total wrench into your typical love triangle.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like another trope that came, you know, like the love triangle. What now?
Yeah, right. But he in the third book, especially, he totally subverts it. And it's like, oh, wow, I've never seen a love triangle done in this way before. And so I think you'll actually really, really like that. Yeah. But, and then earlier you mentioned how Grimdark shows all these nasty things like rape and murder and stuff. And yeah, I totally think that, you know, books that are not afraid to show that definitely feel a lot more grounded, definitely feel a lot more, you know, these are things that somebody who's living on the streets, somebody working in, you know, the assassination trade would see on a daily basis. And so I think it's really important for books that cover that stuff to also kind of shine a light on everything else. But the thing that I've noticed with Grimdark, at least any author who's really good at their craft, I feel like they never really show those things in like a positive light. It's always to kind of be like, hey, like this is terrible, and it's what the characters have to live with in this world. I don't think I've ever felt like it's glorified or anything like that. So
I think if anything, you know, you're not trying to brush it under the rug. You know, these things happen. If it hurts, you know, then you're actually feeling something, and that's nothing compared to what like those people would be feeling. So I appreciate it, but I can understand how it would be difficult for some people to read.
For sure. Yeah. Matter of fact, and I think I even sent this to you too, but on our last episode with the Fiction Fans podcast and Between the Lines, I asked them if they wanted to do this book with us. And then shortly after, I was starting it, and I sent them a message on Twitter. I'm like,
yeah, you sent me that.
I'm like, hey, by the way,
this is grim.
Yeah. And like I've read this so many times that I kind of forget about it because there's so many other things that like draw my interest as far as the series goes. And so, I really forget about how dark the beginning of the first book is. And so, yeah, I definitely sent them a message. I'm like, hey, by the way, I should give you a content warning. There's there's rape and there's really bad things that happen. So just letting you know.
FYI.
Yeah. All right. So, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but do you want to talk about the graphic audio book a little bit? Because I think you read that for the second book, right?
Yes, I do want to talk about it because I want to warn someone and save them.
Yeah.
Just the aggravation. I think I said it best on Twitter where I go, it's like going to a live reading at a very loud and crowded bar.
Yeah.
And the background noise was so loud, and they even would put like nature noises in, like wind and rain and all of that. And I'm like, I don't need that.
Yeah.
And you've got it about 10 decibels higher than the narrator who's speaking.
Yeah.
So I keep turning up the volume, hoping that I'll hear better. But no, it's just also making background noises louder. And then there was confusion with they changed things up. Logan is like Geyer in one and Gyre in another audiobook.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, the pronunciation was different between the two audiobooks. I bought the ebook today to re-look through it because I missed so much from the sound effects, and I was playing it at the same time to see things, and they change up, like they're talking about two characters, they might be like flip-flop the name, and we talked about how it'll say like somebody rang a bell and they just ring the bell, they don't narrate that. And I just found it very confusing, and it really, I think it kept frustrating me because I was like, I should have just bought the physical book. I knew it was like a 600-page book, and I listened to the books at 2x, so like 2x, 2.2x. I go up pretty high because I can get a book done in 5-6 hours, and I'm done. And my family thinks I'm a psycho. They're like, how do you understand
that?
I was gonna say I've been reading that at 1.7 the last two books.
7x.
No, 1.7.
Oh, 1.7.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, oh wow.
I tried 2, and I was like, I'll get there someday. I'll be able to do 2.
Yeah. So this book was impossible to listen to at that speed because they would do accents, and you couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
So I had to listen to it at like 1.5, and I felt like I was like slugging through quicksand. I was like, oh, I just want to listen to this faster. But anytime it was any of the girls, I can't think of the sister or the
Magdalene Drake and those girls.
Yeah. And they would have accents for them. And so you couldn't play fast because you could, it's hard enough to hear at 2x. You got to really be paying attention. But that's like with somebody speaking in like an American accent. So I can do it. But once you start throwing the other accents in, I was lost. Yeah, it was rough. So I would not recommend the graphic audio to anyone unless you're able to somehow lower the background effects and noises. I just found it was awful, and it made me. I was like, I like the book, but this is making me not like the book in a way because it's frustrating me. But it was on sale, so that was why I bought it. I was like, oh, this will be fun, like I was like, maybe this will smooth out some of the things I missed in the first book, because like you'll have different characters' voices, and it'll make it more fun, and like I'm watching a show or something. And it was the wrong decision this time. So
you had the same you had the same experience, right, Gabe?
Oh yeah.
When
for sure.
Because you tried it, right?
Yep. And that was the very first thing that I noticed was that the background noises were so intensely loud compared to the people talking. And that's when I maybe lasted 30 minutes. Like it wasn't that long. And I was like, I can't do this. And I texted Spencer and I was like, that is the worst put together, directed graphic. Cause we listened to, what was that one about the vampires?
Impact Winter.
Impact Winter. And that was an incredible graphic audio. It was so good. It was like, yeah, it was incredible. And so, yeah, I'm right there with you. I would not recommend that to anybody.
No.
Yeah.
They shouldn't even have it on Audible.
No, it was really, really so bad. So I wouldn't do it. Just
one graphic audio that I would recommend if you really want another assassin fantasy is there's a trilogy called, I think it's the Shadows Sun Trilogy. And it is phenomenal. It's like Kylar if Kylar was like older. It's almost like following Durzo Blint. And and he's got like this ghost companion that can, when he's like infiltrating a place and trying to find his target, like his ghost companion can go through walls and kind of scout things out for him. And their dynamic is just hilarious and awesome. But yeah, that had a fantastic graphic audio book. And it's one of the few I've seen that was better for having a graphic audio. Yeah.
And I've been trying to get into audiobooks just because like I can do other things while I'm listening to it. Dishes or laundry, or if I'm like working on a craft, I can listen to it. But I found with this audio, the graphic audio, like you had to sit and like, I like was pushing my headphones into my ears, hoping that I would hear the people speaking better. And I texted my husband. I was like, just so you know, like you're going to see the charge. Like I'm buying the ebook because like I need to skim this before I go on the podcast.
For sure.
I was like, so much of it went over my head. So I was really glad that I skimmed it today in the ebook and then watched you guys talk about book one. So felt like I had a slightly better grasp on it than I did yesterday.
Cool. Yeah. So let's talk about the author's other works for a minute. Have you read Lightbringer?
I have not, but I've seen it everywhere. And I saw that you guys and Ben were going to be talking about that before this, right? So I definitely put that on. I feel like I've heard that one's really good.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people have enjoyed it.
Yeah. So people told me for a long time that if you're a fan of the Night Angel books, then you're like Lightbringer is absolutely like the evolution of that. And it's not a assassin fantasy, and it's not even really grimdark, but you can definitely see it's one of those times where you're like, oh, this is like definitely the same author who wrote the previous series. And it's phenomenal. I've gotten all the way up to I think book 3. And it is just so good. I think even the people who read Night Angel and didn't like it would still like Lightbringer. Like it would probably have more for them than Night Angel did.
Yeah. But and they're both long series, right? Like there's a lot of books in both of them.
So Night Angel has 3, and then Lightbringer has, I want to say 5. I think he originally tried to do a trilogy, and then he was like, I need 2 more books.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So anyway, right now he's actually writing, and I tried to become a beta reader for this, but I just barely didn't make the cut. Cause I don't know why, but they told me they told me like we literally just picked the last person before getting to you. I'm like, damn it. But he is writing another series in Mid Cryo.
Like in the same world.
Yep. And it's enough rumors and kind of, people have let enough slip that at this point, we know that it's a continuation of Night Angel. And so I am like so over the moon, excited about that. And now that I'm reading this series or this trilogy again, I'm realizing that there's actually a lot of foreshadowing for possibly the next one that's coming out. Like there's something that Dorian says in the last book saying, the person who's supposed to be wielding Kirok isn't even born yet. Yeah. And so there's somebody who is in the womb in the third book that we see.
I could be the guess.
And so, I'm pretty sure that the next trilogy is going to be focused around that person, and that's going to be the person who's supposed to be the guy wielding Kirok. And so anyways, I'm so excited for that.
I love stuff like that. Like I love Robin Hobb's like Elderling series. Have you ever read any of them?
I haven't. I've been too afraid of what happens to Fitz. Everybody says that character is just tortured relentlessly throughout the series.
He is, but she did that where she does like, the first 3 books are following Fitz, and then the next 3 are people on a different side of the world, and it's all supposed to like tie in, but like I skipped the other people because I was like, you left me hanging with Fitz. I need to know what's happening. But I would recommend that series to. I've never cried so much. But she is just a phenomenal author. Like she pulls you in, and her writing is so easy to read, and one of my all-time favorite series. Really, highly, highly recommend. Definitely doing it, even though he's tortured. They're so good.
For sure. Okay, I'll definitely add those to the TBR. So there's a interesting theme that I want to talk about that is going through the books, and I'm only just now realizing it on this reread. So there's this ongoing theme in the books about doing something when you're supposed to do them the first time before it becomes a problem later on. Mm-hmm. So in the last book, Kyler stays his hand multiple times from Durzo, and everything goes to, or not only Durzo, there's multiple points in the last book where Kyler stays his hand when he should have acted, and everything goes to hell because of it. He stays his hand from the God King at the beginning of this book, and there's, as it turns out, there's not enough wet boys to take him down when the time comes, and the problem gets worse and worse. And Kyler has to fight him in the end anyways. But at that point, he is basically losing Aline. He's losing Uli. He's ringed to Vi, and he's lost his hand. And so I think this is kind of a big teaching moment for him, because if I remember correctly, in the third book, he becomes more of a man of action, doing things the right way the first time when they're supposed to be done. And that's kind of this character arc we see from him, which is funny because that's actually something Durzo was trying to teach him in the first book at the beginning with Doll Girl. Because, they're looking at Doll Girl on the ground, and Durzo is like yelling at him, he didn't kill Rat when he was supposed to. And Aline was cut up and scarred because of it. And then not only that, later on in the book, Dorian tells him, you have to kill Durzo the first time, otherwise Kalidor will invade and it'll be really bad. And he stays his hand from Durzo, and then Kalidor invades. And then he knows from what Durzo said, or from what Dorian said, he knows that if he doesn't kill Durzo the second time, then Aline and everybody he loves will die. So that's when he acts. So I just think there's this interesting theme going throughout the books of doing, it's kind of an odd thing to draw an example from, but, doing something the first time when you're supposed to, so it doesn't become a problem later on. So anyways, I just thought that was kind of an interesting theme I didn't catch before.
Yeah, I would say I didn't really pick up on that.
Oh, see, I think that's like a really common theme in a lot of like the assassin books in a way, because like you have to learn your lesson the hard way. Like your master can tell you something, but honestly, until like you've really and truly messed up on your own from not doing what they told you, then you're like, okay, like I had to learn from the experience, but you want to like shake them and be like, you didn't have to go through all of this.
You're
like
right.
You didn't have to learn it this way.
Yeah.
I was trying to save you like what happened to me and how I had to learn these lessons and just pass it on to you.
Yeah.
But I realized like that's kind of what like the overarching theme was going to be, was just that like, all right, well, you're not going to listen to me, so you're going to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And he does, man.
Yep.
Oh, yes, he does.
Let's see. You have a note here about tropes, I think.
I felt like there was a lot. I thought there was like a lot of tropes throughout all of the books. Where there was the kid from the slums brought to the other side and then is like faking it as like somebody that they're not. I thought that's like a really common theme you see in a lot of books. I thought the obsession with Doll Girl was I thought the apprentice master relationship really was, where they're really mean to them to try to get the results. And then him not being able to use his magic. I thought that's like a really common thing, like, oh, there's something wrong with you. That's why you can't use it. And not that they were bad. I just, for some reason, felt like, wow, this book had like a lot of tropes going on.
And with that, I haven't read a lot of fantasy pre like 2000, or like pre like 90s. But I kind of wonder if this book was not the one to like start those tropes, but I think it was published in a time where those tropes weren't as common or like, they weren't as used up as they are today, because I definitely look at Kyler and Durzo's relationship and I see that all throughout all the fantasy that has been published since then. And especially in books like Age of Assassins and, just so many things, even like Mistborn, there's kind of that, that relationship between Vin and Kelsier. And so, I think this is just kind of a product of its time in many ways. But
I didn't mind them. It was just something struck out. I think it was when I was writing my notes and like what I wanted to remember when we were here in case I went completely, scatterbrained. And I was like, oh, wow, there are quite a few in here. And then especially you get to the second book, and it adds even more of them. So, although like I appreciated it though. And I mean, you've got like the crazy God King, who's a total psychopath and like that kind of stuff. Like I actually really enjoyed a lot of the God King, like chapters, I guess you could say in it, the content.
Yep, I agree.
He was a good villain.
I thought like the things that Brent wrote to make him a villain were amazing, like the short straws. And then making everybody else beat the person. And they made the two brothers pick him, and the one brother got it and the other one wouldn't look at him, and then helped like beat him to death. And how he said he had them beat them with their bare fists because he knew it would last longer. And I was like,
he's evil.
God. But I loved it because I was like, wow, like how do you come up with that? Like I was like, that's good. Like that was really good. So I could see how some people would be put off by all of that, but I loved it. I love a good villain. I love someone that makes me really hate them. And I really hated him.
For sure.
He was the one character that I thought the voice actor was really good in the graphic audio because his voice was actually scary. Where I thought like Kyler's, I thought they had somebody too old doing his voice. Like, isn't he like 17, 18?
Yeah. Well, he's like 20 something in the second. He's like 21 in the second book.
Okay. I just felt like it was like a man's voice. I guess I kept thinking of like the 11-year-old boy or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
And then they're just like, oh, by the way, it's been 9 years since I've been training. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm going to jump ahead there. Got it.
Yeah. The God King chapters were amazing. And he has, what was it? Trudonna Jadwin.
Yeah. Trudonna Jadwin.
Who would make the statues. And speaking of the short straw at the beginning, when he tells her which side the straw is on and he puts her up against her husband, and he's like, the long straw is on your left or whatever. And she's about to take the short one. And she's like, and she takes the long one.
And he tells the husband, like, oh, she was sleeping with the prince. I have to kill him. And the husband, like, everybody thought he knew, like, that his wife was this woman who cheated on him, and he didn't know. Heartbreaking. And then she picks the short straw.
Yeah. And even at the end, he's like, I still love you. And then he's getting beat to hell. But then that
was hard.
Yeah, that was for real. But then she goes on to, we see in the first book, she makes all these sculpted statues. She made one of Eileen and whatnot. But in the second book, she's making statues out of corpses. And, Kyler and Vi go into this room, and I think it was maybe Magdalene Drake or something that was on the railing, like hanging over the railing. And he's like, oh my God, this is sinister. And it was just horrifying.
Yeah, that was a rough one, because it looks like she's just standing there, and like you said, you could see the bruises on her still and stuff. That was horrifying.
Yeah. So let's talk about some world building stuff. I literally almost called you Kyler. Gabe, do you want to talk about Calidor? How did we feel about Calidor in this book?
Calidor. So I'm so bad with names. Calidor is the God Kings.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Calidor is, again, I think sinister is the best word for it. All the people in it, the God Kings rule is like, or ruling, I should say, is very like demonic and dark. And then using the Veer is like another, that's like pretty much what drives their hierarchy, right? Is this Veer that comes from Kali. And so that's pretty wild. World building wise, which I guess that kind of is like, I'm not like recollecting like places there other than like God King's castle and whatnot. All of the different nations got jumbled for me.
Sure.
Like, where they lie. But yeah,
I mostly just meant like their society is like a whole.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I got that. I got that first try. But yeah, they're crazy. They're crazy, dude.
Yeah.
They're insane. And the God King is just a, it's
Psycho.
like, yeah, psycho. And it's kind of like a, dystopia, right? Like just this awful place to live and whatnot. And then it was cool to see, what's the name of the city that Kyler went to with Eileen and Uli?
Caernarvon.
Caernarvon, yeah. So that was also kind of cool. A different place outside of the norm, outside of over the bridge and stuff. So that was interesting. And to see there, and it's cool how, each place has their own like little things, like getting ringed in Caernarvon or whatever. It's kind of their own place and different not rituals. What's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, it's like a wedding ritual.
Yeah, but I mean just dang it, it's just on the tip of my tongue. like different places do different things.
Right.
There's like a word for that.
Sure.
Ceremonies?
Yes, yeah, something like it. And so that was cool.
Right on. Yeah.
It's gonna bother me. I'm gonna be thinking, what is the word?
I know it's bothering me too.
It'll come back. You know what? I'm just gonna Google it while you guys talk right now.
I think because I did the audiobook, like everywhere was named really weird. So I because I didn't read it, I didn't have it like, so if I read something and I can't figure out the pronunciation, at least
Culture.
I've seen the word. Culture.
Yeah.
There you
Culture.
go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sure.
Simple one, and none of this.
I know. It was gone.
For sure.
But yeah, because I didn't read them, and so I didn't have imprinted in my head like, oh, at least if I can't pronounce it, I can still see it and I know it.
Right.
So like I had trouble keeping up with all the different places, but at the end of the day, it didn't really change anything for me. It didn't really like affect how I felt about the book. So
yeah.
Although I do appreciate when authors choose like easier names.
Yeah.
Right? I know. The typical thing is like, it's hard for the physical book readers because they don't know how to pronounce anything. And then the audiobook readers don't know how to spell anything. So like all my stuff on here is probably misspelled.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I have two comments to that. One being me trying to look up how to spell Sakage. And I kept speaking it into my phone, and my phone kept hearing Chicago. And I was like, that's not what I'm saying. And then me and my mother-in-law were talking about book club, and she was like, yeah, some people do audio, some people do the physical. And she goes, it's funny because when we get there, the audio people always know how to say everything correctly, where the book people are like, wait, how is it pronounced?
Yeah.
So there is like a really big difference depending on what you do with this kind of book, because
for sure.
Once I make something up, that's how it's stuck in my head. It's never going to change again. So
it's been like super difficult when I've read something like in a physical format and then listened to the audiobook later and it's pronounced in a way that does not match what my brain is telling me.
Not at all.
And so I'm like, I don't like that.
No, I definitely feel you on that, because then when you want to go talk to people about it and you have it stuck in your head is how it sounded in your head, but you know how it's supposed to be now. It's
right.
So confusing.
Yeah, it creates complications for sure. So for Calidor, I really liked how we kind of find out how their veer is used a little bit. And I think we find out even more in the third book, but they're all Calidorans are doing this prayer to Kali every day. And it gives them a little piece of their magic every day to go into this big pool for the goddess Kali to use and kind of divvy up as she sees fit. And so I really, really like that, because I've never, ever seen magic done in that sort of way. And so I just think that that's super, super interesting. And then they do get like a boost from their magic by causing like pain and suffering while doing that prayer. Like that one guy near the end of the book, we saw him like, he was like pushing on Elaine's like temples or something. While saying the prayer. On pressure point. And he was saying the prayer to get more energy out there. And so I thought that was interesting, because, you know, some books will just talk about like, oh, some magic is like evil, or some magic comes from a bad place. But this actually like makes sense, like why their magic is like tainted and evil, because it's literally coming from the emotions.
Torturing.
These negative emotions are feeding the magic. And so I thought that was just a really, really cool way to do it. And then also the God King has like hundreds of sons.
And then we find out who's his daughter. That shocked me.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for that one, unless there were hints that I missed.
I don't think there's any hints. Yeah. I've never caught a hint earlier on in the book. I think that's a total surprise. But were you guys surprised when just for a moment he told Kylar, like, I'm your father?
And he's like, just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, that almost reminds me of, Durzo saying that he gave Doll Girl, the scars. When I read it or heard it, I didn't read later where they say like, oh, was he lying or something like that?
Right.
And I had to go back and I was like, okay, he was lying. He just needed Kyler to kill him. So he was like, what can I say that'll like actually give him, the motivation to do it?
Wasn't that incredible? Because it like, even like us, probably our first time through the book, it's like, oh shit, Durzo cut her up. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And it's this terrible
You're
moment.
like, oh, I read this wrong the whole book then. You're like, I read Durzo completely wrong.
Yep.
I had him pegged as like he's being mean, but he's not really mean.
Right.
And now I was like, oh, whew, okay. Good thing he's gone, right?
Yeah.
I guess not, though, maybe.
And speaking of Durzo, like this kind of goes into like, a topic I had later on in the notes, but since we're here, it's interesting to see Kylar little by little in this book discover what kind of man Durzo was, and how he was actually like this great man. Like he was this hero of legend who, held countries' fates in his hands. And he was this, renowned hero by many names. And it's just wild for Kylar to, and this is what I love about grimdark and, relating genres, is that it really is a tragedy. Like, there was no other thing to do besides kill Durzo, but then it's not until, and he kills him out of malice, but it's not until later that he learns who Durzo really is. And at that point he can't take it back. And so that's the kind of conflict I love in some of these darker, more tragic books.
Well, and I love how, you think Durzo was in love with Mama K's sister. You know, that's what they lead you to believe and all of that. And then you find out that like they were really the loves of each other's lives. And he was the only one she would have ever said yes to if he had asked her to marry him. And then you find out that Uli is theirs. And it was just like one thing after another. And you're like, okay, I thought I knew who he was. I had him in the box. And now it's like, okay, just kidding.
Right. Like I was totally wrong.
For sure.
So wrong.
Let's talk about the Chantry a little bit. So I forget exactly how this all pans out, but they basically kidnap women and girls who show talent to bring to the Chantry to try to, you know, get them to learn their magic responsibly. And I think that in any other scenario, this might be a good thing, but like we see somewhat in this book is that the Chantry, once you're in there, it's kind of a bit of a cult. It's kind of a bit of a, you know, the girls get in there and they start, they start learning magic and they want to like advance in the ranks and they become this person that they probably wouldn't have become if the Chantry had never picked them up.
It's very cult like. I watch a lot of true crime and I have a weird obsession with cults. And the latest one I did, I think, was like the Nixium one, and they do that where you get a different colored
I've heard about like, this
ribbon thing to wear, and so that's what motivates everyone. It's like, oh, I want to get the next one, and like next thing you know, you've dedicated your whole life to get this stupid piece of cloth that goes over your shoulder, and you're like, I don't know who I am anymore. How did I get here? So it's kind of like a very similar parallel type real life thing that happens. So
that's cool. I mean, not cool, but like that's very interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating is the right word.
Yes. That's what I always say. Anytime people are like, why are you so into like all these cult documentaries? I know. I'm like, it's fascinating to see these normal people who start out somewhere and then, you know, the ones who drank all the Kool-Aid because they thought like a spaceship was coming to pick them up. And I'm just like, I need to understand human nature and how these people got here.
For real, for sure.
By the way, have you read Wheel of Time?
So I read the first 3.5. I think I got halfway through book 4.
Same.
And I just was like, I'm forcing myself. Like I am bored out of my skull. I'm someone who doesn't like wordy books. Like I don't need, it's like the show 24 where they go through like the whole hours of the day. And I'm like, I don't need like every minor conversation. You're giving me 50 pages of one conversation. I can't do that.
I felt the same way with The Shadow Rising, the 4th book. I got halfway through it and I was like, okay, I gotta set this down for a little while. But what I think is interesting though is the Chantry are really similar to the Aes Sedai. And I mean, they even have like their place of power that they bring girls back to and everything. And then the Lee Knot in these books are really similar to the White Cloaks because they don't believe in magic. They hate magic and they try to kill those with magic. And so I thought those were two pretty interesting. I mean, they've got to be inspired from Wheel of Time. I can't imagine that they're not inspired from that.
Well, and Wheel of Time, like you had earlier, has the, you know, women touch one magic, men touch another. That's like a dirty, dark.
That is kind of that is similar. Yeah. Because like women in these books, they have to speak while they cast their magic, and men, they don't need to speak while they do it. And they both have different like preferences to what kind of magic they do. All right. So yeah, let's move on from that a little bit. Gabe, we weren't able to talk about the magic system a whole lot in the last book or in the last episode, mostly because there wasn't a whole lot of magic in the book. But in this one, we get a whole lot more. So do you want to talk about some of your favorite bits of the magic from this one?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I mean, we have the talent that we, Wet Boys have the talent. And then once Kyler goes to that tournament, right, or whatever, You learn a little bit more about the
in the last book. Yeah.
Yep. You learn a little bit more about the Glorvirden, I think is what it's called. It's like the well, right? And we also see, this might be in the last book too. No, I think it's in the second one. We see that like, you absorb magics from like a
sunlight,
a hearth. Sunlight, a big fire and stuff like that. Which is pretty interesting. And learning about like the well and how that connects to the other part, which I forget the name. There's like the Glorvirden
conduit.
Yeah,
I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And that's what kind of allows you to like affect the real world with the magic. And then also like, the Veer, of course, is a new one. And the Veer is like pretty overpowered in a sense. And so that was interesting. Pit worms with the Veer, they can summon these otherworldly, things from a different dimension or whatever it is. Yeah. These monsters. We also see basically like the Ferali, which is like let's see, I'm forgetting words. It's just like an amalgamation of different parts and magics, and they can absorb other people, and they can absorb weapons and then use the weapons and stuff like that.
It's like the worst human centipede ever.
Yeah exactly. And so that's pretty cool. The Veer has a lot of cool magics. They're all terrible, but pretty cool,
right?
And again, I agree with you about how it's kind of the Veer is used in a sense of like they give a little bit every day, and then Kali gets to like gives the God King the most Veer, and then the Ethlings of the 12th Shara or whatever it is, lower and lower. And so that's cool. And then like with Dorian and Fier, we see like weaving, right? So like weaving different spells into place to like do these things. And for instance, when Dorian sets up this weave to basically fry his seeing talent.
Yeah.
I thought that was super cool and very interesting, and kind of, the steps and processes that he has to do for that to like work out.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, we definitely got a lot more the magic, a lot more the weaving, which I think in the first book we only just got a taste, just like one scene where we saw Dorian weave some stuff. Yeah.
And then we see the Niles, the two healers, like Driss and Nile and her husband. It talks about them like combing their weave through Logan
and dipping it. They would dip the weave down and then pull it back out, and then remake it, dip the weave down, pull it back out. Yeah, that was super cool.
Yeah, that was really interesting. And then they talk about like for Vi, her compulsion is like they're explaining it like it's like a knot inside her, and they're trying to like carefully undo this knot. And some of the knots they were able to just break, but other ones they had to be very carefully pulled apart.
And then with that compulsion too, like it was, there were countermeasures that Gareth had like weaved into it, right? Like, because for instance, when Vi's in there, Driss's husband, touches the weave and he jumps back and he's like, I just about killed all of us touching that weave. Like, holy crap. Yeah. So that was also super interesting.
I can't think of a lot of books where they've done that, where, depending on where you were, you have all these completely different methods.
For sure.
I thought that was really interesting.
So that is super cool, and something that I only noticed on this read through was Durzo says near the beginning of the first book, he's like, people think that all of these different magics are from like different places and they all come from like a different well of power. He's like, but all of these magics are actually the same, and they all come from the same source. They're just used differently in different cultures. And so I thought that was really interesting too, how, you can have the same power, but because of where you grew up or because of how you believe in magic, they all are expressed very differently.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of like civilizations. You think like, hundreds of years ago when they couldn't contact each other, and, everybody needs fire. Everybody's going to need like the same things, and how everybody, figures it out on their own in all these different places, and they end up being all these completely different techniques. So it's definitely, that was fascinating to me, how they all were so different, like the sunlight people who, do everything naked basically.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was really cool. I can't think of a lot of books where an author has gone to the trouble to like write out so many different methods.
For sure.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's the Sethi, who like the Sethi pirates and stuff, and they're always just naked. And it's funny because they even mentioned they're like breasts aren't erotic to them, but if your ankle was uncovered, it's like super sexy to have your ankle uncovered.
That's super early in the first book. It's when Solon goes to see Logan for the first time, and the mom is being like an ass to him.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
He like calls her off. It was great.
For sure, yeah. And so then we also get this really interesting scene where Sister Ariel helps Kyler pull in a bunch of magic so that he can like move really fast. And he has like this near spiritual experience with all this magic just getting absorbed inside him, and everything is just super vibrant. And then he just like, he runs like Sonic the Hedgehog all the way to Scenaria. I love that. Oh, and then we have, let's just talk a little bit about Dorian's visions. So these are really interesting because it's not explained like how or why these work magically. Yeah. But the more he dives into looking at his own life, the more insane he'll get. Yeah. And I think like
not for him, but
yeah. I think they said regardless, no matter what future he looks into, he'll go some amount of mad. And so he knows that he's going to end up completely crazy in the end. He's just trying to get all this other stuff done before that happens. And so I think that his visions are really, really interesting.
I have problems with any sort of future tellers in stories, because I always think it's going to be like, okay, well, you're going to do something trying to stop it, and you're going to be like what makes it actually come to fruition.
Right.
You know, like, so you're fighting something that you're never going to win. So like, why look? Like, I say, like, if I could know the day I die, I'd want to know. And I'm like, you're crazy.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Know. Like, don't tell me that.
Yeah, for real.
I think you're just like playing with fire there with, looking at the future. And clearly it's not set in stone. If you looking at it can change it. And you know what you're going to see something you don't want to see. So just, I'm an avoider. Just avoid it.
For sure. And for instance, a good
example.
Example of what you just said was Dorian and Janine. Because he sees, he has a vision where he sees, oh, I have a wife. And in the end, he makes a choice. He's like, I either go to wherever it was, or I follow my future wife. And so like, the repercussions of him not going there, you know what I mean? Like,
I had a quote about that somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. So my note is Dorian realizes he has two roads ahead of him. Caleres, where Janine is, or the road to his friends, death and love, or life and loneliness. Yeah. I never caught this before. I never realized that there was a second path that he could have taken.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting how he has to decide between Caleres and his friends, which is, Caleres is death and love, or his friends are life and loneliness. Like if he goes with his friends, he'll have like a mostly happy life, but he'll be lonely. He won't have like this woman he's come to love through his visions.
Which is crazy. Let me just say, that's crazy talk.
I seriously, like, that is probably one of the things I'm looking forward to most talking about in our next Night Angel episode. Yeah. Because that whole thing with Janine is wild. Yeah. And I have so many mixed emotions on it. I've never been like pulled two ways more than that whole situation.
Well, and actually really reminded me a lot of like book one with Durzo, when he had to choose between his sister, I'm forgetting her name right now,
Vonda and the Kakari.
And he had to choose in it. So like I thought that was kind of like a similar thing where it's like when do you go with?
Yeah,
for sure.
It's kind of a lose-lose way. So it's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
what can you live with more in the end?
Right.
And that's what it boils down to, exactly. Because no matter which decision you make, there's going to be consequences for not making the other one,
Right.
Which one is the lesser of the evil?
Yeah, for sure. Before we go into our favorite characters, there's just something I want to mention really quick that I noticed this time through with Ferali. There was some sort of mage that mentions another type of Ferali called Baleria, which, there is some other different types that we do see in the third book, but we definitely don't see Baleria. And so I wonder if it's something he's going to introduce in the next trilogy. So,
Awesome.
all right. So let's talk about some of our favorite characters from this book. Did you guys have any specific ones that stood out to you?
I would say Logan.
Yeah.
Gyre for sure.
Mama K.
There you go. Yeah.
Love her.
Yeah, Mama K's awesome.
Mhm.
I think that the arc, the Ma, right?
Yeah.
I think that speaks to Logan's character in such a way that like nothing else could have done that.
Yeah.
That makes any sense?
It roughens him up and makes him.
Yeah, it makes him really raw, right?
Yeah.
He has to drop all the noble bullshit and everything else, and that stuff doesn't work down there.
Yeah.
You had to go from noble and whatnot into just being like he had to survive, and through that, like his character grew so much, like in his like decision making, like he's like, I know how to make hard decisions now. Like I'm not afraid to do something I need to do. A little bit more mature, I think, and whatnot. And I would probably a little more jaded too, which is not the best thing, but I think that it works out, right? Just because of what he went through. If that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But yeah, Logan probably takes the cake for me in the second book.
Definitely.
Oof, so for the second book,
yeah.
I in terms of like likability or who I just was like the most fascinated with.
Either one.
Totally
Yeah,
up to you.
for sure.
I loved any of the God King chapters.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep.
He's so multifaceted, but at the same time, it's all like fueled by this hatred and this need to like, be in charge of everything. And that's always something I've always loved about even the real world and books, these people who just feel the need, like, I need to be in charge of everyone. I need power. Yeah. I've never understood that because I'm just someone who's like, I just want to like chill, you guys can like where we're going to dinner. Like I'm too like laid back, whatever. So these people that just need power has always fascinated me.
Yeah.
Just I'll never personally understand that motivation, but it's really such a powerful one for some people. So I love reading about it because you kind of can like, okay, I would never do that, but I can see what's motivating them to do that. So
right, for sure.
I totally agree. I think it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Just the level of power hungry that he is like so far past like most things you'll ever experience,
Yeah.
Like most, I'm sure there's plenty of power hungry lords and books or whatever, but to me, and I'm sure same to you, it was just like a very visceral, like power, like hungriness. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was also fueled with like he had to do all these horrible things too.
Yeah.
You don't have to do, or do you? Like, do you have to get people so scared of you? Yeah. It's so that you have to be horrible. Because he got off on, oh, you're going to be a fighter. He says that to
Bye.
That he says it to her at one point before he admits that, she's his daughter. He says like, oh, you're a fiery one or something like a fighter. That's turning me on. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay.
There's a really interesting comparison to be made between like Logan and the God King are like two very opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Yeah. Like people truly respect and, want to honor Logan. Like they sincerely have this this thing in them that's like, I want to follow that man. And then the God King is all fear. Like if somebody could usurp him, they absolutely would. But I don't think many people in Scenaria are looking to usurp Logan. They're like, this is the guy we need.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the other interesting thing about the God King was, you talked about like, why do you want all this power? There's multiple people in this book that ask him that. They're like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you acting this way? Like, why is this what you do? And he's just kind of baffled. And he's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And they're like, why do you want to accumulate all this power? And he just like, he's like, he doesn't even understand the question. Like,
yeah.
It's interesting, but I look at it this way. I mean, how many books have you read where there's the good guy and the bad guy who, one, the power's thrust on him. He doesn't necessarily want it, but, he feels it's his duty. So he's going to do it. And he's a natural born leader. But then you read the books where those are the easier ones to like kill off.
Right.
Because they're not prepared. They're not looking at every situation as like a game of chess where it's okay, what move do I need to make next? And the God King is definitely someone who's looking at the whole chessboard. And
right.
Yeah. They're going to be harder to get rid of because of that. But so I thought that's really, it was interesting how they did that.
For sure. By far, my favorite character in the series, period. But my favorite character who absolutely steals the show this book is Viridiana Sovare. Oh my God. I love her so much. She is like my fantasy crush. But I just love her character arc in this book. It's so good. How she goes from, at the beginning, she's answering to the God King and he's giving her this mission with either killing Kylar or killing Jarl. And she doesn't want to. She just wants to, like, she actually kind of wants to be free from like Hugh Gibbet. And, I don't think she wants to go become a seamstress or anything, but she doesn't want to be under the control of these like evil people anymore. And so she figures if she goes to kill Jarl, then, she'll be free. She doesn't have to live under the hand of Hugh Gibbet anymore. And so, but I don't think she realizes that in doing that, she would now be living under the hand of the God King.
Yeah.
And so, she goes out and she kills Jarl and she instantly feels remorseful from it. Like this is the one friend that she had in her entire life.
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand like why she just did what she did. And so then she tries hunting Kylar, I think was her next step. But then everything happens and she finds out that she actually has this compulsion, which is most likely what led her to kill Jarl. And so then she has this whole experience with Sister Ariel. And, it kind of starts to like change her a little bit. And she's like, oh, maybe there is another option besides just being this assassin. I can go to the Chantry and learn magic and whatnot. And even her, the whole time that she's riding with Uli, she starts to care a little bit for Uli. And then she goes on to the Niles place, and that's where she sees Kylar. And she has this moment where, and she's like taken the rings, like Kylar's like rings and all this stuff. And she didn't know how important they were, but she figures it out along the way. And she's at the Niles and Kylar comes into the room that she's in and she has a sword to his throat. And then she pulls it back and she like gets on her knees and she's like, my life is yours. Like if you want to take my life for killing Jarl, like you'll never understand how much I regret that.
Find out like she had the compulsion for it, right? Like so even of her own free will, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. And I love that scene because Kylar is looking at her like, yeah, you if anybody deserves the Night Angel, it's you. But then once he actually looks at her with the Night Angel sight, he realizes that she has actually killed less people than he has.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of like, he's stood in judgment of people for a lot less, but he's also kind of like, okay, like maybe we need to figure something out here. And so then Mama Kay comes on the scene and she's like, you can't do this without her. Like, you at least need to work with her until this whole thing's over. And so then they infiltrate the God King's palace, and they have this amazing chapter where they're being super flirty. And at this point, she's realized that she is pretty much in love with Kylar through just like, this is even before the ringing. And she's like, I really respect this person. And, he's different than any other man that I've known up to this point. And so she's starting to have feelings for her, which is like really scaring her. And then they get into the God King's palace. They have this really flirty scene, which was really great. I love it. But then Kylar forgives her, and she like apologizes for killing Jarl. She's like, it wasn't like I take full responsibility for it, but I didn't know what I was doing. And he's like, I know, I don't see Jarl's death in you.
Yeah.
And then, then we go on to the God King where, Kylar, her compulsion kicks in and she kills Kylar, and then she rings him. And then there's this moment when Kylar comes back and kills the God, or she kills the God King, but then he like severs the ties. And he looks at her and realizes that they're ringed, and he's feeling all these like waves of emotion from her. And I just love where Viridiana gets to at the end of this book. And especially I cannot wait for her scenes in the third book, because she has one of the best character arcs that I've probably ever seen in fantasy. Mm-hmm. Just the way that her character graduates from where she started out as in the first book is just my absolute favorite. So anyway, yeah, she's my favorite character from this book for sure. What about some of the side characters? Any of the side characters? Do you guys like them? Like Caldrosa Wynn, the Sethi pirate lady. Do you guys remember this chick?
Wasn't she with people and they were like staring at her because they're like naked when they are on the ships? That one.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. And then she goes to work for Mama Kay.
And she was involved in the Night of Blood or whatever that.
Yeah, the Nocta Himata.
Yeah, Nocta Himata. So that was cool. And then seeing her with the Order of the Garter after Logan comes
my God,
back. Yeah. That was cool. She really, that whole scene where Logan, frees them from their guilt and then chastises all the people that like were judging them like viciously and makes everybody just like realize how much of a dick they were being to these women was so cool.
That is, there's so many things in this book that are like my favorite things in all of fantasy that I didn't realize were in this book. But Logan's speech is like bar none my favorite monologue in any fantasy book. Like that speech like literally brings me to tears every single time. Yeah. And like you said, freeing them from their guilt, establishing this Order of the Garter, and basically saying like, you guys who have spent the past like year or whatever in servitude to the Caledorans and having to do these things in order to survive, like you are seen as like respected and worthy, and you will join like this honor, like my honored guard, at like as the king. And so it's like, oh my God, it's just this incredible moment. Yeah. And then for Caldrosa, before that happens, the Nocta Himata happens, and her husband comes by the brothel. Oh yeah. And he sees her, and oh my God, that scene is heart-wrenching. That is like a knife to the gut. And he's like, how many have you been with? And she's like, I don't know, I've lost count, 9 or 10 a day. And he just like breaks down and he's just like sobbing. And he has to walk away. And in both of these situations, like I definitely understand, but like Logan, when he does this, like, you know, he gives this impassioned speech and he's like, men, take back your wives, like understand that they did what they had to do in order to survive, in order for Scenaria to survive. And they did this amazing thing. They killed like 600 Caledorans in one night. And it was just this amazing speech. And so then finally he's like, men, go to your women, take back your wives, take back your husbands, etc. And she can't find him in the crowd at first. And she's looking around. She's about to go to Mama Kay because she sees Mama Kay doesn't have anyone to stand with her. And she sees her husband Toman, and he doesn't even say anything. And he just goes down to his knees and starts like sobbing. And I'm like, just like crying so hard during this scene.
It was hard to read about like the girls who they said they kept magically sterilized in the bed. And like that was hard. I was like,
oh, are you talking about the comfort women? For,
for the God King.
And for the soldiers, that is
and they said
brutal.
They kept them like magically sterilized. And they'd be raped like dozens of times a day, and that's what would kill all of them. Like nobody lasted long, and it was like these poor women, none of them want to be doing any of this. And like you're looking on them. So that was a really great like come up moment after you feel so terrible
for sure
about what women have gone through and then how they're treated by their society. So like I was really happy after reading like Logan's whole, you know, empowerment. Everyone, and that they listened. So
100%. And then also at the end of that speech, he says he's going through this whole thing with what's her name? Is it Gunder? Janine, not Janine Gunder. Tara Grayson. Is that it?
That's it.
Her.
That's it.
Oh yeah.
She
sucks. Yeah.
She's awful.
The worst.
And so he's going through with this whole ceremony because he's like, this is the only way to save the city. And then by the end of it, he thinks back on what Count Drake said. And he's like, you know what? I will not do this just for my own reputation or for my own status. He's like, I don't need to be the king. And so he says like, no, I'm not going to marry her. And that was just a fantastic moment.
But that's like one of those moments where you read about it and you're like, okay, Tara was willing to like let everyone die essentially, because if Logan didn't let her, you know, be the ruler.
Yeah, she is like over controlling.
Like, okay, I'm just gonna let everyone die then if you're not gonna like make me or let me. I was like, okay.
She's a very power hungry individual.
Right.
I thought that was really interesting, and that he went along with it. I mean, you know, somebody had to make the difficult decision. He didn't really care. I guess. So.
But then in the battle, even though she made him like go to the front lines in the battle, his Order of the Garter was all around him. Men were rallying to him because they knew that this was bullshit. They knew that, you know, their king shouldn't be on the front line. And so all these men are just dying for him.
And General Aegon even goes to his men and he says, you know, the queen will have me hung for saying this. But no matter what, protect the king. Like, you know, like he's like, I'll be arrested for whatever heresy or treason. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was like, man, that's, you know, just goes to show. And then everybody did, just like you said, everybody backed him up. Everybody.
Yeah.
It only strengthened his case.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It was like, oh, that is the good guy. Okay.
Right. Yeah. For sure. So I want to go through some of these quotes. I don't know if you guys wrote any down or if you'd like to read some of these. But some of these are really funny and some of them are just really interesting. So Gareth has this moment with Vi where it's at the very end of the book where they're squaring off against him. And he says to Vi, you may want to leave the fighting to the boys, Vi. And she says, fuck you. Yeah. And he says, a distinct possibility, child.
Oh gosh. Sick.
It's so evil, but it's so funny.
I'm laughing at this, but I'm laughing at that.
I know, right? I know. And then just all these scenes with Vi in chapter 26. There's one where Kyler runs through the Ferrari and he's got all this magic clinging to him, and then he pushes it out and it's all glowing around him. And Vi says, "What are you? Hugh never taught me anything like that." He says, "I'm just a wet boy." And she says, "No, Kylar, I don't know what you are, but you're not just anything." I thought I'm like, that's just a perfect way to describe Kylar.
For sure.
And then all of these like super flirty moments between the two of them during that chapter. At some point she says, "Does it make my butt look big?" Or it's right before they're about to go into the God King's chamber, and she put on her wet boy grays again. She's like, "Does it make my butt look big?" He says, "You get your big ass in the hall." And then earlier on, she says, when they're just starting to work together, she says, "So you haven't said anything about my grays." Kyler raised an eyebrow. "What? Do you want me to tell you if your trousers make your butt look big?" "They do." "Happy? So you have been looking at my butt. What do you think of the rest?" Are we really talking about this now? Kyler glanced at her breasts again and got caught. "The haughty disdain thing will work better for you if you don't blush," Vi said. He says, "They're great," he coughed. "Your grays, that is. Not that your breasts, I mean, the style is perfect for you, just over the line between sexy and obscene." And then she says, "I'm a woman. I don't get to pick clothes for comfort." And Kyler says, "I can't believe we're having a conversation this long about clothes. You call this a long conversation about clothes? Haven't had many lovers, have you?" And then he comes back with "Just one, and not for long, thanks to you."
Oh yeah.
Oh, stick the dagger
heart.
in.
Stab to the heart.
And then I think the last one I have here is he tried the rusty door. It opened silently. "Well, I'll be damned," Vi says. "So it doesn't just work on little girls." Kyler eased the door shut and stared at her. "Why don't you try it on yourself?" he asked. "I already did," she says. "And anyone further than 5 feet away can't hear me." He says, "That's not what I meant. Anyway, how can you be sure it works? You didn't hear what I just called you," which was true, but not clever enough to repeat.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's good.
Do you guys?
There's a couple moments here between Uli and Vi.
Yeah.
And so the context it's after, Vi kidnaps her, but
yeah,
basically Verdiana, they're going back and forth. Uli must call her a girl or something, and she's like, "I'm not a girl. I'm a bitch, and don't you forget it."
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And
then there's another one here when they first meet. Vi's like, "Let's try this again. What's your name?" Uli says, "Uli." "All right, ugly. We're leaving."
All right, ugly.
And then she like still calls her ugly. Like
she calls her ugly the rest of the book. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Funny.
All right, ugly.
All right, ugly.
Dorian. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I was gonna say the only one I could think of that made me really, really like laugh was in the first book, and it shouldn't have made me laugh. It should have made me like be really grossed out. But when Mama Kay, was it, who she goes and visits Roth?
Oh yeah.
And she's eating his food, and he shows her the whole peasant.
Yeah.
I remember this. Yeah.
Your peasant, and she goes, "What, you mean pheasant?" And he just like smiles at her, and I was like, "Oh
yeah." Yeah.
He's like all the people he killed getting dragged inside.
Yeah. My God.
I was not prepared.
I know.
That's my biggest, I think, gasp.
Like, oh my God.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That one little line, "enjoying your peasant," and she was like,
"Wait,
you mean
what?"
pheasant?
Yeah. Oh man, so bad.
Oh, so Dorian, I liked this more for the prose. But Dorian has this really great quote. He's doing his like prophecy thing, and he's looking at Kyler's life specifically. And he's looking into his past. And he says, given the choice of taking his lover's life or his mentor's, he had chosen to give his own. The bull had offered each of its horns, and Kyler had vaulted over the bull's head. That was the Kyler that mattered. In that moment, Dorian saw Kyler's naked soul. And so I thought that was interesting. There's a little bit more context to that, where he's talking about, Kyler is never satisfied with having the two options. He's going to be the kind of guy that always finds a third route to go. And I thought that was pretty interesting because I never really thought about it in that way. And then he's looking into, I think, Kyler's present, because this is when Kyler is in Caernarvon. And he's mentioning that Kyler is still going out every night to, practice his assassination stuff, even though he's trying not to kill anybody. And I just thought this was really great prose. He says, Kylar is shadow in twilight, a growing colossus with one foot planted in the day and another in the night. But shadow is an ephemeral beast, and shadow must darken into night or lighten into day. And I was like, wow, that was just like a really cool poetic way to describe Kylar. I just really like that.
I'm always in like awe of authors and just their ability to write, because I read something somebody wrote on Twitter of all places once, where it was like, I've always wanted to be a writer, but I've realized I'm a talker. And I'm like the same way, where I can't write it down, but like I can go back and forth with someone.
For sure.
But
Yeah.
Right.
It's of people who can like get their thoughts down on paper.
For sure.
Because not something I can do.
Another great Dorian quote was, he says, a wolf might become a wolfhound, son, but it will never be a lapdog. And that kind of speaks to what Kyler's eventual decision is. Like he doesn't want to just kill people for money, but he also can't be this mild-mannered herbalist in Caernarvon. There's something in him that makes him a man of action. Yeah. And so let me see if there's any quotes I absolutely need to.
For sure.
Oh, there's one more Vi quote where it's one of her first scenes where she's trying to get information out of some guy. And so she's having sex with him, and he's like having trouble because she's not like acting into it at all.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And so she says, I love this moment. And I love the way that the narrator does it in the audiobook, because it's so perfect. It's like, what happened? I thought you were going to give it to me good.
Oh, you did that too well.
Oh God. I love that so much. Okay, so there's one that I really want to read. It's kind of long, but we can go right into favorite moments afterwards.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So there's this moment for Kyler, and this is another, like, I'm a really big fan of like just really well done monologues, like just big paragraphs of text from one character. And so Dorian says to Kylar, and I think, so this is when he's still in Caernarvon and Dorian is appearing to him in a dream. And Dorian says, you've got choices to make, but here's another hard truth. You can't be whatever you want to be. The list of things you'll never be is a long one, even if you do live forever. Do you want to know what's at the top? Mild-mannered herbalist. You're as meek as a wolf, Kyler, and that's what Aline loves about you, and it's what she fears about you. You can't keep telling her it's all right, that this disguise is who you really are. It's not. Why don't you trust Aline enough to ask her to love the man you really are? And then Kyler says, because I hate him, because he loves killing, because she doesn't understand evil and he does, because he never feels so alive as when I'm bathed in blood, because he is a virtuoso with the sword and I love what he can do, because he is the night angel and the angel is the night and the night is in me, because he is the shadow that walks, because he believes some people cannot be saved, only stopped, because when he kills an evil man, I feel not just the pleasure of mastery, I feel the whole world's pleasure at the retribution. An evil man is an affront, and I erase the blot. I balance the imbalance. He loves that, and Aline would have to lose the innocence I love about her for her to understand that man. And then Dorian just has this fantastic thing where he says, this man, Dorian said, poking Kyler's chest, and this one, he poked Kyler's forehead, are on their way to madness. Take it from one who knows.
Yeah.
And dude, that whole scene just like gets my blood pumping every time. I'm like, wow, that was just like, especially the narrator's delivery of it is so like impassioned. And oh, it's so good. I absolutely love that. All right, so let's talk about favorite moments. I know you guys got some.
Yep. So mine, and so when Logan's in the hole, you know the guy that's got the jaw problem?
Oh yeah.
Nash. Okay, I just
Nasher.
remembered his name. So these are, I guess, two of my favorite parts in the same, I guess, in the maw, I should say. The first one is when Logan, you know, he's first in there. He's, you know, basically like reading how everything's going to work and what these people are like. And it's the middle of the night and he hears Nasher like gnawing and like his jaw hurts, and he goes over there and he, you know, gently massages his jaw basically.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Nasher gives a big hug and Logan's like, in that moment, I knew that I had a friend for life.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is pretty powerful, man. Just like that simple act of kindness, right?
Yeah.
There's no kindness. Like,
Yeah,
right.
that's it. And
you show kindness.
yeah, and Nasher was, I mean, he is devoted to Logan now. There's no matter what, like he is devoted. And so that was cool. And then the second one is when they're escaping the maw after they get, you know, everybody on the other side of that long water thing that they had to go through after Kyler fights the dragon.
Yeah.
And then, you know, he's like, all right, you know, my guy's going to open the door for us. He knocks. And sure enough, you know, Gorky opens the door and Logan's like, what? First thing or second thing he says, kill him. Without even a doubt, Kyler cut his head off.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, that's like, and Logan's like, that's what power feels like. That's what he was, you know, that's what I was warned about basically. Like that's power. You know, I've got so much at my fingertips just, and I don't know, but yeah, those are two of my favorite parts.
If I can squeeze in there, so right before, I think it's right before they see Gorky, or it might be right after. So they go through the whole, or so they're on the inside of the water thing, and Kyler's like, hey, your friend doesn't look like he likes water much, Logan.
Yeah.
And Logan's like, oh, like we'll come back for him or whatever. But then they go through the water and they realize that it is hell. Like it is treacherous getting through this water.
Yep.
And there's some sort of big beast in the water as well. And so they get to the other side and Kyler tells him like, hey, I don't know if I'll make it back. If I go back for him, like, can we leave him? And Logan thinks about it for a second and he wants to say, yeah, leave him because he's so close to having his life back. And he says, no, like I couldn't respect myself if I asked you to leave him. And Kyler says something like, yeah, I basically like, I'd lose respect for you. You know, I'd lose respect if you told me not to go back for him.
Yep.
And so Kyler goes back and gets him and they come out of the water and fight the dragon and everything. But I just thought that was like a phenomenal moment because all of this stuff has happened. Like all of these things have added up to get to the point where Logan is finally on the other side and he is finally free. And the only thing standing in his way is possibly leaving a friend behind.
Yeah.
And he won't do it.
Yeah.
And so that's I love Logan.
Character, man. Character.
Yeah. It's amazing. Sam, any favorite moments from this book?
So we like talked about two of them already, when Vi his allegiance to Kyler and Logan's speech, and then my favorite would have to be like the last line of the book. That to me was I loved that. I don't know if we're getting there yet, so
go for it.
That Durzo was like alive.
Yeah.
Letter, and it was dated, and it made me really happy because I had forgotten all about the letter Durzo had written him, and then it was so much so we couldn't read it, and I kept like waiting So like, there's got to be some way we're going to find out like what was in that letter. And I had completely forgotten about it. And then at the end, you're like, oh wait, he's alive. So he'll be able to tell it. Like, it doesn't matter about the letter anymore. And that got me really excited. I was like, okay, you know, I might've liked the first book a little more than the second, but this is like, oh, now I need to read the third.
For sure.
I need to know where this goes now.
Yeah.
Because you know, you have a lot of books, fantasy, where people get killed off and then they're not dead, but like he wasn't brought back at all for the second book. So I'm like, okay, he's really dead. Like he's dead. And that was like, I was like, okay, I didn't see that one coming at all because we went through the whole book without him. So I like that. Now it's gonna be like, where have you been? How are you alive? Like, I have some questions.
and I'll just say, the way he comes back and the things that he tells Kylar are really fascinating. Like it's really, really cool the way that it all happened.
Yeah.
And kind of who Durzo is now. It's
So I'm definitely like that line alone, I would say, is like what made me be like, okay, well, I'm definitely going to read the third one. Then I was like on the, you know, fence about it, but I was like, okay, now I have to. My curiosity peak. Now I need to know.
For sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I love this scene where the local Sakage in Caernarvon is just such garbage. And Vi, she comes into town for the first time, and all these Sakage thugs kind of get around her, and they're like, oh, like this is a toll road, like you have to pay the toll. And then they're like, you know, trying to get with her and all this stuff. And she's just trying to find the Shinga. And finally, you know, they're all like touching her and stuff. And like, that doesn't really matter to her, but then they touch her hair and she goes into a frenzy and just kills every single one of them. I think some got away, but when she like blacks out, and when she comes back to herself, she's like sitting on a stoop, like holding her hair, and just everybody is dead in the worst possible ways that they can be dead. And there's just like blood everywhere. And so I love this scene where she finally gets a little retribution.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a question about a scene that I find really interesting, and I just want to know if like you do get more about it in the future books. The wolf.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So he's there, Kylar's there, and he's, you know, got to pick his door, but he's begging to be sent back 2 days early, right?
Yeah.
And so my question is with Vi, she puts the rings in their ears, but was that even necessary? Wasn't he going to be coming back regardless?
So he would have come back regardless, but it would have taken like 3 days.
But that's why I thought he was making the deal with the wolf.
Well, So Vi didn't know. She wasn't sure. Like Uli said that he would come back and stuff. Yeah. But in that scene where the sister like kind of like covers for him, that's when Vi escaped. So she wasn't sure. And so she's like, she needed to break her compulsion, and the outward showing of an inward change was to ring him. So
It was for Vi, not for Kylar. Yeah.
Okay. See, I thought she was doing it because she's like, oh, like I need to save him. He's dead. Like I understood like that aspect of it, but I was like, he would have come back.
Yeah.
It wasn't really necessary.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So
she Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just going to say that was to break her compulsion, so then she could therefore trick and kill the God King.
That makes sense. Like, cause I was like, I didn't think that was like needed, but maybe that was the point. And then I was like, I need to know more about the wolf, because isn't that was in Durzo's letter was don't do any favor, don't make any deals with wolf. And I was like, well, he already did. So
you'll definitely you'll learn everything you need to know about the wolf in the third book for sure. But Vi, I don't think Vi knew that, like, people had told her that Kylar would come back, but I don't think she believed it.
Yeah.
And so that's when she put the ring on him to be like, well, you know, I'll just get rid of my compulsion. And then when she did, she could feel through their connection that he was healing and that he was slowly coming back.
Yeah.
And so then she was like, oh shit, this is like rape. Like what I've just done is like horrible. Like I can't imagine. And I took all this away from Aline. And
But
so
good, honestly, I don't like Aline. So
yeah, I know,
Yeah.
right? I know. And so that is going to come into play in a big way in the third book. And it is just so good. It is so good. So good.
And I want to know more about like when he was with the wolf, and the wolf is like, well, you didn't need to cut your hand off.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know.
And I was like, oh, why tell him that? Don't even tell him that.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, but I was kind of like, what an idiot, because he's already walked through a Ferrari while he's covered in the Kakari. So why would he not think that he could just cover his arm in Kakari and pull it out or walk right through or whatever? I'm like, come on, Kylar. Lost the lights.
4-year-old boys, you know?
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. So yeah, I have a note on that. I just said that I love the whole climactic last act where Vi rings Kylar, and like she was already like, if we're being honest, like she was already in love with him. But once she rings him, she like falls madly in love with him. And even Kylar is feeling stuff for her now. Mm-hmm. And then she stabs Gareth, and then he comes in at the last moment and cuts the veer that was trying to take over her body.
Yeah.
And then Logan, so Lily shows up in the Ferrari on the battlefield, and Logan convinces her to go kill all the Caledorans and to run into the hills. And she does that, and running into the mountains. And I just love like this whole last act is just action. And even when it's not action, it's like really high stakes things that are happening. And so the last like quarter of the book is just so phenomenal. And kind of in that last quarter, Kylar finally kills Hugh Gibbet. And he sticks his cloak in that gear in the water wheel type thing. And his head literally pops between the gears.
Great.
Yeah, that was wild.
That was great. I love moments like that, though. You know what I mean? Where they like find like a really creative way to kill them.
Yeah.
Live for those moments.
Oh my God.
When it's somebody so awful, you're like,
yes,
I don't want it to be clean. I don't want them to just like slice their throat and they're done or something.
Right.
I want give me something good.
For sure.
Their own medicine.
Especially after we get that scene with Vi and Hugh, where she goes to like his apartment or whatever, and he's like forcing her to like sit on his lap, and he's like touching her and all this stuff, and he's like blasted on mushrooms, and he's just like, oh man, I just want him to die so painfully.
Like a slow, painful death. I mean, it wasn't very slow, but I'll take it.
For sure. Yeah.
Grape, I'll take it.
I also love this scene where Kylar goes, he puts on Durzo's face and he goes to the smith to sell retribution. Mm-hmm. And he the smith that recognizes him thinks that he's Galen Starfire. And so he's like, oh my God. And this is when he starts to realize that Durzo is like a hero out of legend, because Galen Starfire is like this legendary name. Right. And so I thought what an incredible thing it must've been for the smith who saw Durzo when he was a boy, and his father was like, you'll probably either never see him in your lifetime or like your children will, but he'll be back. He's like an immortal, and told him all about Durzo. And so for him to see this reincarnation, I mean, it was just so cool to see the smith like over the moon about this.
Do you ever think of that saying, like, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain? Like that's how I thought of it, where it's like, he was a hero and now he's set himself up to look, you know, well, he was a wet boy. He's done, you know, all the terrible stuff, but it's like, oh, wow. Like you can start out really good and end up, you know, still the villain in the end, or at least perceived as the villain, you know, because that's the story you build around yourself. But yeah, that was great. But that was one of the scenes I got confused in the audiobook, because I was like, wait, what?
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
The way that they did it in the book, it was just really confusing.
Plus in that scene, there was probably people hammering on anvils super loud. And
was just, yeah, that was a rough one, but I got the gist of it and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah. During this time, Kyler also finds out that retribution is made of perfect diamonds and cannot be broken. The smith tells him, this is not a blade that should sit on display. It belongs in the hands of a hero. And gives him, I think it was like 32,000 something
crowns. Yeah.
Yeah. For the sword. And Kyler thinks like, it's a good price for your birthright, huh? And then he goes to get the rings, and the rings that Aline wanted are the exact price as the sword. And he's like, funny how the exact price to marry Aline is the exact price of giving away my sword and putting this down for good. And there was just some really cool symmetry there.
Yeah.
I just hate those kind of things in books when it's like the girl doesn't want the guy to, be who he really is, essentially. Like, and how at the very end of the book, when she's forced to kill, it's like, oh, now I understand.
Yeah, that did happen, didn't it?
Yeah.
It's like you can't see anything until it happens to you. It's
I know, like how self-involved.
Yeah.
I think in this way, like, present day with like all the abortion bans and stuff like that, the people that are most vocal about it, if there was ever to be suddenly a situation where they needed it, then it's like, okay, now I get it, because it's my case and I understand.
Yeah, right. For
it's
sure.
Just that kind of situation where I'm like, oh, you couldn't like put yourself in someone else's shoes for like 1 minute.
Yeah,
for sure.
Everything she's been through in her life. Like, how do you still have your head in the clouds?
For sure. So the last thing I really wanted to mention was Durzo, during one of his POV chapters, he goes through this list of things that either have happened or will happen. And I wonder if we can spot all the prophecies that have already happened. So I'll read this, and some of them I don't think have even happened in the third book. I think some of them are from whatever his future works are. So might be kind of interesting. It says, he looked back at his own life, trying to figure out how to avert disaster. In a moment, he was swept up into the current. Faces streamed past him, became a maelstrom, sucking him down. His young wife crying, a girl hanged, a little village in a northern Wadrin where he might live with Fierre's family, a red-haired boy who is like a son to him 15 years from now, killing his brothers, betraying his wife, telling his wife the truth and losing her, a gold mask of his own face, weeping golden tears. Yep. Marching with an army, Nefdata, walking away from an army, solitude and madness and death, a dozen different ways. Down every path, he could see only suffering. Every time he chose any good for himself, those he loved suffered. And so now that I'm reading this, I think most of this is going to be from the third book. But even having read the third book, I don't know what a girl hanged is. Let's see, a little village in northern Wadrin, that obviously will take place either in the next book or later. Same with the red-haired boy. So I think killing his brothers happened in the past, because that's how he rose through the ranks to be an Orsul. Marching with an army, it could possibly be this book. And then of course we see the golden mask.
Yep.
In this book when he puts that on to avoid Callie.
Yep.
So I only bring this up because I want to save this quote for the next episode we do, to see if we can match all these to events that happen. I think that might be kind of fun.
That would be cool.
All right, let's see here. Let me scroll back down. So especially for Sam, what So thinking of the next book, what would you like to see? Do you have any theories? What are you hoping to see in the next book?
Well, so I'm hoping to see like Logan succeed. I'd really like to, after everything he's been through, see things get maybe a little bit easier for him, but I have a feeling it won't, just because of all the responsibility that's going to be heaped on him. I don't want to see too much of a love triangle, but I would love to see Kyler with Vi. That's what I would love. She's the one I want him to be with. And I'm just dying to know where Durzo's been, what he's been doing, how he's alive, what was in that letter. That's what I want to know. I want to know what was in that letter. And the fact that I get that answer in this book drove me.
I bet.
And I'd forgotten about it. They were like, "Oh, hey,
yeah, here's another letter.
Here's a reminder that I still didn't tell you."
Yeah.
So like that's pretty much what I really want to know or see.
For sure.
Or I'd love to see some more Mama Kay again. I've always really enjoyed like a very intelligent woman who's been through a lot and always has a trick or two up her sleeve. Although I did think it was weird how she was like, "I'm not going to tell Uli I'm her mother, and I want you and Aline to take her and run off." That I wasn't a fan of, but I'd like to see more of her. But yeah, really, Durzo is just like the thing I'm dying to know the most. And but I'm definitely gonna buy the book later, and because I just need to know. And I'm hoping he doesn't like hold me off too long, make me wait too long again.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly where in the third book he comes back into play, but it is definitely like, wow, like it's really, really cool. Real quick, speaking of Mama Kay, did you have any like favorite moments of hers in the first book? You mentioned you liked a really intelligent woman in that kind of position, and I would agree.
Who like made the most that they could of it. And well, because I liked when you find out that she's the
Shinga.
Yeah, she's the Shinga. I thought that was I loved that moment. I was like, I think I rewound it and played it again and was like, wait, did I hear that right?
Yeah.
And how she set Durzo and Kyler up against each other. I liked that, but then I really liked when Kyler came back and like poisoned her and made her to him. I love that. And then that fact that he left the
antidote.
Up to her, like, do you want to live or not? And I was like, oh, I was blown. I was like, please take it. I don't want to leave her yet.
Yeah.
So those were definitely some of my Mama Keys. And the pheasant peasant. My favorite just stupid line from the book that I just can't get out of my head because I was like, wait, did he just say what I think he said? And she like says it, and I'm like, oh my God. Those are definitely some of my favorite moments with her.
For sure.
I was definitely surprised to find out that her and Durzo were the real lovers.
Right.
That was a big one. And I feel like I wasn't that surprised though. It was like, I feel like there were hints along the way about it, but loved it. Loved that.
For sure. I like how she's kind of the political advisor to Logan in this book. I'm like, that's a good position for her.
Yep. She can do a lot of good there.
Like training for it her whole life, essentially. And now she can do it with someone, and really help tons of people.
Right. Yeah. All of these characters are finding new ways to use their dark side abilities to help Scenaria and to help the people who deserve to be helped,
For sure.
Yeah. So I really like that.
You read it and you're like, if I had gone through 1/100th of what some of these people went through.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't have done it.
For sure. So the last thing I really have to say is, and it, this isn't something that we're going to see until Brent Weeks' next series, but Kyler meets the riot weed addict who's part of the Society of the Second Dawn in this book.
Yeah.
And we actually see him, what's his name? Aristotle or something like that. Aristarchos. And
Ben Eberron.
We actually see him in the first book. He comes up to Durzo at like a brothel or a bar or something, and he calls him Galen Starfire. But Durzo played it off like he was joking or whatever. And so that was a little bit of foreshadowing too. And he's actually there earlier in this book too. We see him with the God King, and we see the God King kind of pulling him into, everything that he gets pulled into, which I never noticed until this read through. So my whole thing is, this isn't something that we really get any answer to or see explored in the third book. This whole other society that knows about these immortals. And the guy even said, like, we have a feeling that there's probably like 6 or 7 immortals walking the planet. And so it makes me wonder, like, the other Kakaris are obviously out there somewhere, even though nobody can find them. And so I wonder if in the next series we'll get more Kakari. There'll be, I almost wonder if it'll be a prequel series where we see how the Kakari were made and all the legendary heroes, or if I hope it's a continuation of Kyler's story, and seeing everything that happens after that and all these Kakaris being found or more heroes coming to the forefront. That's really what I want to see. But I want to know more about this society who knows about the immortals, because I just thought that was really cool. Like, they're really tight-lipped. Like, Durzo seemed to be friends with them to some extent. He would like answer their questions and be nice to them and stuff. So I thought that was really interesting. All right, guys, any final thoughts on the books? Any last minute things?
Don't listen to the audiobook one that I listened to. Listen to the regular one.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. Don't listen to the one I listen to. It's bad.
For
Just
sure.
throw away your money. But yeah, I mean, talking through the book now, I feel like I definitely liked it more than I thought. I think my anger at the audiobook was clouding my judgment on it for a little while, because I was just so frustrated with it. But talking through, there's definitely like I realized I enjoyed so much of it, actually, and a lot of the storylines. And I can't really think of a moment in the book that I was like, oh, I wish they hadn't gone that direction. I wish they'd done this instead. And that's a good thing, because so many books they take in a direction. I'm like, oh, I didn't want them to make that decision. I wanted them to do this instead. So I think I really enjoyed most of the book. I don't think there's really anything I would have changed about it.
Sweet. Awesome. All right. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. This was seriously so much fun. Come back anytime. I hope you'll join us for the next Night Angel episode.
I'll get it and read it. Just give me the timeline.
Okay, for sure. Yeah. 2 weeks from today, about the same time ish, or whatever works for you.
Yeah, I am down.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us while we chat about Shadow's Edge. Be sure to check out Sam's blog. I'll have all her stuff linked in the description below. And come join us again in a couple weeks when we discuss the thrilling conclusion to the Night Angel Trilogy. And maybe if we have time, we'll discuss the Durzo short story as well. As always, like and subscribe and follow us on Twitter to keep up with upcoming content. And until next time, remember, Vi is a bitch, and don't you forget it. But also never call her that, because I love her and I will hunt you down.
I feel like you can call her a bitch, just don't touch her hair.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.